So, before we get into the main topic, I might get crucified for saying this, but I've never been as in love with Resident Evil 4 as other fans of the series. It's not because I think it does anything necessarily bad, I just never really vibed with the style of it in the same way I do the other games in the franchise. In fact, the reason I prefer Resident Evil 8 is because it keeps bringing you back to the intimacy of the mysterious village that defined the first act of RE4, which in my opinion is by far its most intense, scary and alluring part, whereas the castle and military barracks kinda wore out their welcome for me. Now, for clarity, I will not be going into the main story of the RE4 remake, so you can be rest assured that the only spoilers are late game location based, because I think it would be more interesting to focus on the game's most terrifying isolated scenario than simply retreading another review, so warnings aside, brace yourself. While the village is my favourite section for being grounded and atmospherically brooding as it slowly eases you into the escalating intensity and absurdity, late into the game you're tasked with locating a keycard and increasing its security level so you can unlock a cell containing the president's daughter Ashley. However, in RE4 fashion, a simple task became the game's most infamously subversive moment, where upon activating the generators, you're introduced to this goopy motherfucker.
What the fuck are you?
The Regenerator is probably Resident Evil's most sinister creation. It may not be the muscle-bound lump of mutated mass like Nemesis or the G-Virus or any tyrant you've previously faced, but this thick flexi boy is the epitome of man playing God in the worst kind of way. As its blatant name suggests, all you need to know from a short text log is that an arrogant scientist decided to infuse test subjects with parasites that give the subject a tremendous metabolism and the ability to constantly regenerate limbs and tissue. To the shock of their colleagues and proudness of Dr. Frankenstein, of course the creature eventually escaped its cryogenic chamber and is now defrosting Leon's coldness to fear as you maneuver his early 2000s emo-ass hair around them. Their late-game arrival is intelligently placed because by this point in the game, both Leon and the player are completely desensitized to what the last Plagas can throw at them, with the spider parasites being a particular ass-clenching nightmare fuel. Each of RE4's 3 core locations introduce a new abomination to be faced with. The island has the Goopy Boys, the village has the Chainsaw Maniacs, the castle has the Blind Wolverines, and yes, the remake even throws in another early surprise that I'm not going to spoil. The brilliance of Resident Evil 4 in combining action and horror so perfectly comes from the sheer escalation of danger, as it adds a persistent sense of unpredictability and balance of power, so you never totally feel like an unstoppable badass. But by this section, you're pretty much at top hero capacity, so the game decides to humble you by bringing Leon back to his RE roots in a remarkably intimate way. It's the moment where I really understood the growth in Leon's character between RE2 and 4, because despite maintaining a hearty stoicism throughout the journey, the Regenerator genuinely does briefly penetrate his confidence somewhat. In my RE2 remake review, I talked about how one of the tragic points about Leon's character is his naive hero complex, where he's driven by a zealous patriotic ambition to protect and serve the people, only to slowly succumb to the realization that his sole actions ultimately cannot save the world, and all he really can do is save himself, adding an inconsequentiality to his perspective, much like Jill Valentine in RE3, who already accepts it's every man for himself. In the opening of RE4, there's an immediate forlorn jadedness to his character. He has still pursued his aspirations, but he goes into the conflict cynical and numb to the concept of danger. The first encounter with the villagers is reflective of your first encounter with a zombie in RE2, where, like Leon, you have to adjust to the resilience enemies have to firepower, which is then further brought to life when under siege in the village, as despite Leon now having the skilled ability to fight back, he's faced with a danger exceedingly more resilient to what he's encountered before. RE4 essentially sees Leon living up to the man he always strived to be, by going above and beyond simply saving the president's daughter to effectively saving the world from the lost Plagas, but the Regenerator strips all that self-made hero complex away and retests his composure like his first time in Raccoon City. And by that I mean, akin to my experience with RE2, I lost all composure and found myself incapacitating the regenerators and running past them to the next objective, and somehow getting lost in the confined labyrinth despite the fact I had both a map and the ability to actually kill these fucking things. The sequence very much mirrors the survival horror aspects of RE2, except while the only way to guarantee a zombie was dead in RE2 was to pop its head open, popping a regenerator's head open only pisses it off more. However, interestingly, you're actually told how to destroy a generator before you even encounter it. Hell, the game plays on your expectations by practically demystifying the threat before you even know what it looks like. It's a reversal to being confronted with something you cannot comprehend. Yes, you might struggle emotionally with it, but it speaks volumes that the game tells you what you're about to face and builds up the suspense with a brief sighting and the inescapably grueling noises it makes, and yet when it unceremoniously arrives, you still feel completely unprepared for it. It's not worth gambling your resources, especially on higher difficulties, but I love the fact that you can actually kill it instead of it just being an arbitrarily invincible enemy that becomes tedious and forced. If you sink enough ammo into it and shoot the red parasites, you can kill one long before you get the biosensor that displays the parasites in infrared, so it does reduce the tension somewhat if you're willing to do so. Even with the biosensor, you would think it trivializes them if you have good shot precision, yet besides the challenge of using a magnified scope in close quarters, eventually the game throws a curveball your way in the form of ones that mutate into porcupines. There is a gallows playfulness to it, because if you're an RE4 veteran, you know it's coming, so the game ensures the challenge is still unexpected, as they basically become ticking time bombs that shoot out spikes critter style upon dying, or yank you in for a cacti bear hug. Eventually, you encounter a lab where you locate the biosensor and have to use it to find a wrench inside the stomach of one of 4 cryogenically frozen regenerators, and to rub salt in the wound as you wait for the keycard to be updated, in come dynamite-wielding soldiers who would be a welcome return if it wasn't for the fact they can trigger the other regenerators if you forgot to execute them before. Seriously, as game logic works, if you do not destroy those regenerators, they will come back to bite you on the ass. Amazingly, for all the talk about the regenerators being one-off, if not the scariest enemies in RE's history, their actual appearance takes up barely half an hour of the 14-hour plus long game. The encounters being short and sweet and having a self-contained feel to them makes for a bigger impact, as the threat of them showing up again never goes away. For a game I personally feel gets less tense as it goes along, I know people will say, well, it's an action game, it's not technically supposed to be traditionally tense, the regenerator scenario perfectly takes advantage of how action and horror can meticulously work together. It empowers you with gratifying combat that rewards your ability to manage overwhelming odds, while punishing your more cocky moments that rightfully put a dent in your ego when you're confronted with the bold words, "You are dead." If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below about the RE4 remake and even the direction the series is taking in general. And until next time, stay safe, stay away from goopy, spiky thick boys, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.